Aldgate, the eastern gate to the Roman city of London, and the start point of today's epic adventure. I warn you in advance, I'm almost a little bit overexcited about the walk today, and I've done too much reading, a little bit too much research for my little head to contain. But I am ridiculously excited about taking on this walk today, about doing the walk myself actually. It's a voyage of discovery. And we all know what my favourite types of walks are, don't we? I don't even have to say it now, do I? It's not just the river walk. It's not just a lost river walk. It's not even a lost river in the City of London walk. This is potentially today a walk along the original lost river, the first lost river, the first of London's rivers to be buried beneath the streets. It's profound. It's ridiculously profound. I've been thinking about it all week, and the more I've thought about it, the more I've digested it, the bigger and more profound it seems. Let's see if we can unpack it. And what's potentially even better than that is we're going to walk two lost rivers. Yeah, two lost rivers today. One, definitely a lost river, but the other, what's known as a dubious lost river. Dubious, declared by the great Nicholas Barton, author of the original Lost Rivers of London book. So let's not muck around, let's get started. So here at Aldgate Square, somewhere in the vicinity of this point here, a river burst through the ground. A spring, a river, that helped shape the eastern end of the Roman city of London. And there's a section of the Roman wall that you can see somewhere beneath the grounds here in the subway. And that's very significant to the walk we're going to do today, because it appears that the Romans built their wall around this little river valley. So if we find that, that's a really good marker to start the walk with. This is looking north along Duke's Place into Bevis Marks, along the line of the Roman wall. And I did this walk, the Roman wall walk, back in, oh God, I think it was December 2020. I'll link to that below, or 2021, not sure which. An amazing walk, an amazing walk. And in some ways, the walk today along the Lorteburn and the Langbourne, keep that in mind, is a companion to the walk I did in January along what we called the Western Stream, the stream on the western edge of the city that flowed into the River Fleet and another canalised ditch that led straight down into the Thames, both of which were enormously significant in the shaping of Roman London, and by proxy, the shaping of the city today, the shaping of its wards, the mere making of its landscape. And I'll talk more about how the contours of London were mapped and lost and luckily recorded. And that's what we're partly walking today. We're trying to recover the river and the river valley and the very shape of this amazing city. And here, this site here, which I think is the Sir John Cass School, on the side of this wall is the first of many ecclesiastical references here. This was the site of the Priory of the Holy Trinity, founded in 1108. I can't actually find access to the wall. I don't even know if it's accessible actually. But here we have, look, we have a map here that shows we're here. It shows you the course of the Roman wall down here, down the east side of Jewry Street. And our river, the Lorteburn, the eastern stream, runs down here, down Jewry Street, and that's where we're going to start. There's an element of controversy which sits at the heart of today's walk, if you like. The great London antiquarian Sir John Stow writes about a river called the Langbourne. In 1598 he's writing this, and he proposes a course for the Langbourne, and he says it's the Langbourne that gives the ward of Langbourne in the city, one of the ancient wards of the City of London, its name. and he describes the river, this fast flowing stream running east to west from Fenchurch Street and then down into the Thames, not far from the Walbrook. In fact, it may even flow into the Walbrook. It breaks into several little streams anyway. Problem with that is, as Nicholas Barton pointed out when he wrote his definitive book, not definitive, but he wrote his enormously influential book, The Lost Rivers of London in 1962, is for that river to be coherent and for us to take it seriously, it flows uphill by at least 3 feet, which seems unlikely. So he kind of dismisses the idea that there is this eastern stream, the Langbourne. Thankfully for us, a guy called David Bentley was having none of it, and he did some proper archaeological research in the 1980s. He was helped, of course, by a number of building works around the eastern edge of the city, which highlighted and discovered a river valley, a clear valley that is described in an 1841 paper about the contours of London. Luckily, a fellow called Kelsey, I had to go back into my notes, in 1841 wrote a paper called The Original Plan of the Contours of London, and it was fortunate because the shape of the city was only just starting to be changed by the railways. Those contours, some of that is unrecognisable from the city today, and he describes the valley that I'm looking into right now. I'm looking into this ancient river valley that shaped the eastern side of the city of London. It's quite a moment. Hey! Fans everywhere. So here we're looking down into the valley of the Lorteburn from this high ground here in Aldgate where it rises, or where it rose, and then it flows under the street here. The Roman wall would be on our left, and I think there are some points down here where we can see the Roman wall. It's interesting that Bentley talks about the change to the shape in the land that occurred throughout the Victorian period to make it quite distinct from what we see today. But there's a clear valley here running through, down Jewry Street, down Crutched Friars, so it's instantly recognisable now that you wouldn't question the possibility of a river here. And what I love is the idea that such a small little river could influence the shape of the City of London. I love that. So just standing here on the junction of Jewry Street and Crutched Friars, that's the name, isn't it? You can see how far we dropped down from the high point up at Aldgate there. So they've actually created an exhibition space from the section of Roman wall here at Vine Street in this building. I think you have to make an appointment, but the significance to this walk today is not just that it's a bit of Roman wall that we didn't see before actually, but it's also because I was reading about this in London Archaeologist, and that's why it reminded me of the paper. I'd read Bentley's paper a few years ago. So in a way this inspired it. What's interesting about this part of the Roman wall here is it talks about the towers that were added in the later 4th century, the troubled years. I guess this was a time of the rebellions. There's various rebellions. Various Roman governors of Britain decided they could rule independent, and that caused a lot of conflict. But they said they added 20 towers, probably 26 to 30 feet high. And part of the archaeological evidence for the existence of this eastern stream, what's known as the Lorteburn, is that there were brick culverts excavated here that are believed to have been used to allow the water to flow through the wall in places, which is interesting. So this is the outer eastern face of the wall, the bit that would have looked out over the marshy ground on the other side.
The Roman city wall was built around the year 200 AD. This section of the wall was part of the London cityscape until the 18th century, when it was swallowed up by the surrounding buildings. The western face of the wall was rediscovered in 1905 and the eastern side in 1979. The two faces of the wall remained within separate buildings. This new development of Vine Street was an opportunity to unite the wall in a single site with a dedicated exhibition space.
It was absolutely magnificent to go in there. They let me in even though I haven't got an appointment. There was no one there actually. And stand there right in front of a big section of the old Roman wall. The base of the bastion that rises above you. It's really profound to look at. I mean, the whole experience is quite profound. The shape of the river valley here that gave shape to all of this glass and steel. All of this is influenced by what was running beneath the street here. Such a small stream could influence the shape of this enormous city, a city that's influenced the entire world. It's anyway, I better get on with it because we've got not just this lost river to walk, we've got the other one, the dubious one, just in case there's something in it. And also there's a street name later on that it tickles me to talk about the etymology of it. So. And we don't only have the archaeological data to help us, we have this, the geological survey map from, I think this one's from 1914, published in 1915, so published, yeah, and revised in 1933, and it clearly shows the course of the river here. It is mentioned throughout records, and we can talk about that a little bit further down, but there's medieval records which make multiple references to the Lorteburn for various different reasons, and so we're pretty sure of the course of the river. These maps are great, by the way, you can access these online, and I've used these in previous Lost River walks. So our walk continues down Crutched Friars. I love that name, isn't it? It takes its name from an order of monks that settled in this area sometime in the Middle Ages, I think around the 12th, 13th century. Had a house here, so they gave their name to this street. We're going to pass down through Fenchurch Street Station. This is also the source, reported source, for the Langbourne, the disputed Lost River. So we'll come back here and follow that course west from the site of a demolished medieval church. There's a bar here in the railway arch underneath Fenchurch Street Station, curiously named Munich Cricket Club. There's obviously a story behind that, but I'm sure someone will tell us in the comments below. So you can see the Tower of London there ahead of us, and our stream makes its confluence with the Thames just to the west of the tower. And there's another section of the London Wall to our left there in that hotel. We went in there in March. I think I should probably go in there again. It's saying March. We went in there when I did the Roman Wall walk. I suppose we're here, we might as well go in, but I think our walk's going to take us down Pepys Street, and then we're going to see a bust of Samuel Pepys. Well, there's all sorts of stuff coming up. So you just go through this sort of quite fancy looking hotel. What's it called? The Leonardo Royal Hotel, London City, and look, straight ahead is a section of the Roman Wall. When I did this a couple of years ago, I seem to remember this being sort of slightly behind scaffolding. That might be a false memory, but I do remember some of this area being subject to building works. Of course, that was during the lockdowns. And this is the eastern outer face. It's mad to think this wall is 1,800 years old. Not all of it, but some of it, the lower sections certainly. The top sections could be medieval. And being able to get right up next to the Roman wall here really does help us conjure up the landscape of Roman London that we're walking through today. You've got the wall here, and then you can imagine that just out there we've got our stream, the Lorteburn, buried beneath the streets. And you can imagine from that wall that had been looking down into a river valley that is partially there, also partially obscured and lost, and still haunts us to this day. It's still there in our psyche, if not actually gurgling beneath the street, because sadly the Lorteburn was filled in. It was the first of the city rivers to be filled in and be buried. It's documented certainly in the 12th and 13th century, and I'll talk a little bit later, there seems to be evidence of it in 1381. But when Stowe writes in 1598, writing about the Langbourne, he concedes that the river had been buried for at least 200 years. So it's interesting, that's why I call it the original lost river, the first river to be buried in London. Bentley attributes the building of the railway through here with the loss of the shape of the land that was luckily documented by Kelsey in 1841. But the river valley really passes through this big building here, Novotel Hotel, and then through Trinity House, but it crosses the lower end of Seething Lane, which is where we will go now. Pepys Street is so named because Samuel Pepys lived not actually in Pepys Street, funnily enough, but in Seething Lane, but it had to be recorded somewhere, so it's recorded here. And just here we have, it's on the corner of, look at this, Savage Gardens, eh? Crutched Friars, Savage Gardens, Seething Lane. We've got better names later on, you just wait. So here in Seething Lane we have St Olave's Church. If I remember correctly, St Olave being the Norwegian king who came to London's aid at some point in the Middle Ages. That's in that video I visited here on my City of London churches walks, but it was dark, it was winter, it was bitterly cold. I think we should pop in here because I believe this is where Pepys is buried. Of course, as Pepys lived in Seething Lane, he's said to have walked in this churchyard, which is also near the house of the famous Elizabethan spy master, Sir Francis Walsingham. It was amazing to see Pepys's memorial stone there in St Olave. I've been in there before, funny enough, when I did the City of London Churches walk that came here. I caught it just at the end of a service. It was a really lovely scene. And today, I didn't realise, is Palm Sunday. 24th of March is Palm Sunday, or the Sunday before Easter Sunday. So I imagine there was a service this morning. I would think there'd be one later on today. I'm not really up on such matters, but it's lovely just to sit in this really peaceful churchyard here. A slice of the old medieval London. We're walking through time. It really does feel like it today. So we'll continue down Seething Lane after a very restorative little rest in the churchyard. That wasn't really a rest, I was just soaking in the atmosphere. But we are not a million miles away now from the Thames and the confluence and the ancient Roman waterfront. It's Seething Lane Gardens, a really delightful, peaceful spot. And I can see the bust of Samuel Pepys down there. If further evidence of the Lorteburn were needed, not for me, I was convinced by Stowe's dubious Lost River Langbourne. The Lorteburn for me is real, but it is mentioned in a title deed, a property deed, in Seething Lane from 1288, which mentions a stream called the Lorteburn in the deeds. So it's there in the record, it's real. We know it's, of course, we know it ran down Seething Lane. And also, there's another intriguing thing. Oh, hang on, let me get a better angle on the camera. Samuel Pepys is sort of behind me there. He's not in, I will show you Samuel Pepys. But it's interesting, this morning, just before I was having a coffee, I was reading about Seething Lane to get the etymology of the name. Apparently it means full of chaff. This is where wheat and hay was threshed. There was lots of chaff around, so it just means full of chaff. I thought full of chaff meant full of nonsense, but no, it literally was full of chaff here in Seething Lane. But there's an interesting tradition that still exists to this day where I've got it written. It's called the Knollys Rose ceremony, and in this ceremony, which still takes place to this day in June, the company of lightermen and watermen present a rose, I think, to the Lord Mayor, something like that. The intricacies of that ceremony are not really what I'm interested in. What is interesting is that it originates as a form of payment, that a single rose from the garden in Seething, I think it is here, it's taken from now, is presented to the Lord Mayor as payment for the wife of Mr. Knollys building a footbridge here in Seething Lane in 1381. If you're building a footbridge, it was most likely going to be over the stream. No, it doesn't mention the stream, but it seems like too much of a coincidence that we know a stream was running through here in the 1280s. So it's likely if someone was building a footbridge here in 1381, it was probably going to be over the Lorteburn. It's intriguing, isn't it? And then not long after that, it seemed that it was buried beneath the ground. And here he is, old Samuel Pepys, looking all majestic. 1633 to 1703, the great diarist of London, chronicler of the plague and the fire. And what's interesting about seeing Pepys here in Seething Lane is he lived here whilst he was a clerk for the Navy. I think he was no junior clerk, he was obviously had a very senior role in the Navy, and it reminds us of how nautical the city of London was. It's a nautical city. I know in the other walk I was banging on about the Honourable East India Company, or more like the Dishonourable East India Company really, and there was a monument to the East India Company, one of the chairs of the East India Company in St Olave's Church back there. So this was a city intricately linked to the sea. So the stream cut across Great Tower Street here, then Lower Thames Street, and then the cryptically named Water Lane. It's actually funny stood here now. You can see, look, this is Tower Hill here. I've come across the top of Tower Hill, so you would think, if anything, it's cutting across lower down because the shape of the land here wouldn't have changed that much. I will quickly reference the wonderful All Hallows by the tower there with its magnificent crypt full of treasures of the past. I'll link below to the video I made where I visited there. That's one of the most astonishing sights in the whole of London. So Lower Thames Street here is said to mark the line of the Roman waterfront. This is where the Roman quay was along here in the early port of London. It's quite a thought, isn't it? And looking down Water Lane here, which is where the Lorteburn makes its confluence with the Thames, it marks an indentation in the course of the Thames here, which is seen at other points along the Thames, where the Walbrook makes its confluence with the Thames, and also where the Fleet makes its confluence with the Thames. So once again, the geology is consistent again with the course of a river. The fact that we have to prove the existence of the Lorteburn is a legacy of the fact that it's the river they tried to bury and erase and try to wipe off the map. But thanks to David Bentley, not the Tottenham footballer of course, I know some of you would have been thinking about that, it is lost no more. It's in the record. He's recovered it from the records and from the archives, from the archaeology and from the geology of the City of London. And once upon a time, before it was buried, this is where the Lorteburn would have made its confluence with the Thames, just down here, just to the east of Custom House. It would have flowed into the Thames, and as we mentioned many times before, the confluence of two watercourses is a sacred spot in pagan belief. Offerings would have been made at this point, shrines will have been built, it would have been a place of worship. So that humble little stream that flowed out into the Thames here, down with Sugar Quay, Water Lane, helped shape the city, helped shape everything that's around us. The great powerhouse that London was to become. And that's why the fact it was buried and they tried to erase it is what I think makes it the original lost river of London, the original, the first lost river of the city of London. Or is it? Or is it? I think we have to walk Stowe's Langbourne, even though Barton tells us it runs uphill. I feel a duty to walk the course of this dubious lost river, to sit alongside the Lorteburn here. Just in case, maybe we'll walk it and we'll see a river. You never know. I mean, Sunday afternoon, right? What better thing to do? So we're just going to walk up to Fenchurch Street, which, despite the fact that my video has just taken, I don't know how many minutes of video, but I've spent about 2 hours walking down from there. It's about a 10-minute walk, 5-minute walk back to Fenchurch Street, and then we'll follow the course of Stowe's dubious lost river, uphill. Mark Lane, New London Street here, which I should be able to segue into a mention of my book, Welcome to New London. I could say something like, hey, welcome to New London Street. That's a bit like my book, Welcome to New London, still available from all good booksellers, or actually from me. This is a slightly more picturesque view of Fenchurch Street Station, and our walk is going to start, or this version of the walk is going to start nearby the site of a demolished medieval church that had a spring in its grounds. So beside the East India Arms, we have St Catherine's Row, which is where we need to go, I think. So in this gated courtyard, I think, was the site of St Catherine Coleman Church that dates to at least the 13th century. And there were springs that broke the ground here. Now, it's suggested that they fed the Lorteburn, but the Geological Survey map sees the Lorteburn rising further north up near Aldgate. But in Stowe's description, this is the source of the Langbourne that then flows west through the city. So there was river, there was water here, there was a stream here that rose here that went into the Lorteburn, or possibly was just a continuation of the Lorteburn. Who knows, maybe it was the source of the Lorteburn. It's the course westwards which is the dubious bit. But look, just here in St Catherine's Row, we do have a little bit of low ground that probably has nothing to do with the Langbourne. So Stowe describes the river flowing west along Fenchurch Street. There is another description of the course of the Langbourne following basically the same route as Stowe describes in his 1598 survey, flowing west down Fenchurch Street, across Gracechurch Street, then down Lombard Street, then down Sherborne Lane, at which point it breaks into a number of reels. That's great, isn't it? Reels or rivulets, and they flow into the Thames. But what's interesting is the reason I'm even out here, and I haven't mentioned it before, remarkably, is because lying in bed ill at the beginning of the week, I was looking at this booklet I bought about Roman London. It's an old one, it's published by the HMSO, Her Majesty's Stationery Office. I haven't pressed the green button here, I need a button. And the frontispiece of this HMSO book on Londinium has a map of Roman London, and it says it's the first map of Roman London, and it was drawn by the great antiquarian William Stukeley in 1772. So not long after, I think the guy was called Christopher Norbrook. Norbrook had described the course of the Langbourne. And on Stukeley's map, I was instantly drawn to this river, the Langbourne, flowing east-west across the city of London. And in Stukeley's map, it flows into the Walbrook. And that's why I started looking it up. I googled Langbourne, found the Wikipedia entry, and then thought, hang on a moment, what about that paper I read years ago? And I ended up finding it anyway. I think it was originally, Bentley's paper was originally published in London Archaeologist, I think. Remains of an old building behind me there. Get this kind of thing a lot in the City of London. And that's how I found the Lorteburn. Really, was from looking at Stukely's map of this dubious lost river that we're walking along now. Doesn't feel like we're going uphill yet. I should also mention that this dubious lost river Langbourne doesn't show up on the archaeological survey maps either. So, unlike the Lorteburn, of course. Just passing the site of St Dion's Back Church, demolished in 1871. Not sure whether I've included that in my Churches of the City of London walks. This is in Lime Street, just off Fenchurch Street. And there are so many different ways to experience the city. You just pick any device you like. They're just a way of opening up the landscape, really, in a way. Whether it's walking between the churches, the lost churches, or the lost rivers. Now, both descriptions of the course of the Langbourne mention Crutched Street here, which runs north-south. In fact, it's marked as the A10, which I guess is Ermine Street, right? Sorry, it is Ermine Street, yeah. But it's not Ermine Street, because Ermine Street starts at the city gate, so ignore that. But that's Lombard Street there as a continuation of Fenchurch Street, so I failed to see how the river could flow along Gracechurch Street and Lombard Street, unless there's some sort of kink in it. I don't know. That's a mark against it straight away for me. So now we'll go down Lombard Street as far as St Mary Woolnoth Church, at which point the river turns south. Now I know when the great Nicholas Barton says it's flowing uphill by 3 feet, he's used some sort of geological measuring thing which confirms that the landscape rises by that amount. I don't doubt that. On the ground, I don't feel like we're going uphill by much. I feel like we're just walking straight. I mean, if I'd not read that takedown and I'd just gone out, I'm going to walk the Langbourne on Stukely's map, I'd be calling it a lost river. I'm not saying it is. In fact, we're actually going downhill. Just saying. And Lombard Street is so named after the Italian bankers from Lombardy who set up shop here in the Middle Ages, I think in the 13th or 14th century, and came to kind of dominate banking in medieval London for a period of time. So here we have the Church of St Mary Woolnoth, which sits on the corner of Lombard Street, and Stowe's Langbourne is said to flow behind the church from the back here and then down Sherborne Lane. So we'll go down here, down Post Office Court. So Stowe's Langbourne flows down here, down Sherborne Lane. And what's interesting is the etymology of Sherborne Lane has a slightly more rustic, shall we say, origin, where there were a number of public latrines over a ditch in the street. So it was, I'll let you fill in the SH word that had the word house afterwards, lane. That, SH, house, lane. Public latrines. Think about public latrines or public toilets that were placed over a ditch. So there must have been some sort of flowing water in Sherborne Lane that facilitated its purpose as a place where people came to relieve themselves. And another one of the city churches sits here. It's been lovely seeing all these churches and remembering the walks that I've done, the City of London churches walks I've done. I think I've done 7 of them. I'll put the playlist below. And the church is, of course, St Mary Abchurch. It's his Abchurch yard. (1841) here, and I guess that's a boundary marker, the marker of the ward, of the Langbourne ward. And of course, rivers and streams were used as boundary markers, which is another thing that lead Stowe to conclude or suggest that this was an actual river. And we emerge on Cannon Street, and it's around this point that Stowe writes of the river breaking up into rivulets or rillets, uses several terms, breaks it up and then flows down into the Thames. Or you could take Stukely's version of it, which has it flowing into the Walbrook just along here. Either way, the Langbourne ceases to exist, I guess, beyond this point here, if it ever did exist. I'll just go down here, down Lawrence Putney Hill, only because I like it. So there we have it, not one, but two lost rivers of the City of London. Stowe's dubious lost river, but the almost cast iron certain Lorteburn, the lost eastern stream, the first of the City of London rivers to be buried beneath the ground, the original lost river of London. Wow, it's really opened up the city for me, broke it open, and the ancient landscape has been laid bare, and those magnificent bits of Roman wall that we saw. And each one of these walks just makes me look at London and the City of London in a whole new way. It just opens it up, reveals itself, its past and its stories and its secrets. I love it so much. And there's more. There's tributaries of the Walbrook. We could maybe walk some of those. And funnily enough, that geological survey map does throw up a river to the east of the Tower of London, which is intriguing, running near the Roman cemetery. I mean, there's so much. So thank you for joining me on that walk. Thank you for indulging me as I rant and rave around the streets of the City of London. I'm loving this series. What is this series? I don't know what this series is, but I'm loving it anyway. And I remember walking around here on another. What walk was that? I mean, the City of London just is the gift that keeps giving, isn't it? There's so many different themes we can pick up here. There's some more Roman wall that's been recently revealed that I want to look at. I've got an archaeological paper in my bag which talks about the medieval and the Roman waterfront down here at Cannon Street. I mean, this is what I will be doing until I exist no more, I feel, and I'll be incredibly happy to keep walking around these streets, and not just here, obviously London as a whole. Anyway, I need a cup of tea, basically. I'm a little bit peckish as well. So, as I always like to say, I look forward to seeing you on the next walk, wherever that may be. I've got something very special coming up in May. That's all I'm going to say. I'm shooting it in the middle of April. There's going to be a screening somewhere, and it'll be here in May. Very, very excited about that. Anyway, well.
It's over the meadow, over the stream, it's where I'm going and where I have been. It's been a long day now, it's time for a beer, and now for home, of course I must steer. It's over the meadow, over the stream.